Hello, welcome here. Have you ever found yourself in a relationship where the air suddenly felt heavy, where words that once brought comfort now sting or leave you feeling utterly unseen? Perhaps it's a subtle shift, a creeping unease that whispers, "Something is wrong here." You try to articulate it, but the words falter, lost in the labyrinth of unspoken anxieties. That feeling, that gut-wrenching intuition, it's telling you that the very fabric of your connection, the invisible threads that weave two souls together, might be fraying. Today, we're going to talk about a psychologist's warning, specific communication patterns that, if left unaddressed, can signal your relationship is in grave danger. Modern life often feels like a relentless current, pulling us in 1,000 directions. We juggle careers, responsibilities, the digital clamor, and in this whirlwind, our most intimate relationships can silently suffer. We might experience anxiety about an uncontrollable future, the pain caused by others' evaluations, or feel powerless in the face of sudden misfortune. But sometimes the deepest wounds are inflicted not by grand betrayals, but by the quiet, corrosive ways we speak. These subtle shifts in dialogue are often the first and most crucial indicators that your relationship is heading for troubled waters. If you've ever felt misunderstood, dismissed, or belittled by someone you love, you've likely encountered these very patterns. Recognizing them isn't about blaming, it is about empowerment, about giving you the tools to understand, to react, and to protect your peace. So lean in, because understanding these patterns can be the difference between a love that withers and one that truly thrives. The first critical warning sign, a subtle but insidious one, is invalidation. Think of a time you shared a feeling, a concern, or an experience, only to be met with a response that dismisses its validity. Perhaps you said, "I feel really stressed about work lately," and the response was, "That is nothing, it is not a big deal." This isn't just about disagreeing, it is about actively negating your subjective reality. Your emotions, your perceptions, your internal world are deemed unacceptable or exaggerated by the other person. The problem here is profound. When someone invalidates your feelings, they are, in essence, telling you that your inner experience is wrong or unworthy of their empathy and attention. It creates a deep sense of isolation, making you question your own sanity and instincts. The concept of emotional invalidation strikes at the core of our need for connection and understanding. We are wired to seek validation, especially from those closest to us. When we express vulnerability, we are opening ourselves up, hoping for a soft landing of empathy. Instead, invalidation offers the analysis reveals that invalidation often stems from a lack of emotional intelligence, a discomfort with difficult emotions, or even a subtle power dynamic where one person tries to control the emotional landscape of the relationship. It is a way of avoiding uncomfortable topics or asserting superiority by diminishing the other's experience. It communicates, "Your feelings are a burden," or "my comfort is more." The application of this understanding is crucial. First, recognize it. Does your partner consistently downplay your emotions? Do they offer quick fixes instead of listening? Do they compare your struggles to others, implying yours are less significant? Second, communicate gently, but firmly. State how invalidation makes you feel. When you say, "It is not a big deal, I feel unheard and dismissed." If the pattern persists after clear communication, it is a significant red flag, indicating a deeper issue of empathy or respect. You are entitled to your feelings, and a healthy relationship honors that entitlement. Another dangerous communication pattern, often linked with invalidation, is the use of global statements and labeling This is when someone uses absolutes like "you always" or "you never" to describe your behavior or character, effectively painting you with a broad negative brush. "You always leave things to the last minute," "you never listen to me," or "you are just lazy." This isn't constructive criticism, it is an attack on your character, generalizing specific instances into an unchangeable flaw. The problem with global statements is twofold. Rarely does anyone always do something, or never do another. They deny the complexity of human behavior and growth. Second, they are incredibly damaging to self-esteem and the fabric of the relationship. When you are constantly labeled, you begin to internalize those labels, or you become so defensive that productive conversation becomes impossible. The concept here ties into cognitive distortions When one person consistently uses these absolutes, they're not engaging with the specific issue, they're attacking the person. This analysis reveals a deeper issue, a lack of ability or willingness to address specific behaviors. Instead of saying, "I was hurt when you forgot our anniversary," which is a concrete statement about a specific event, they might say, "You never care about my feelings," which is an all-encompassing attack. It can also be a tactic to shift blame or avoid personal responsibility. The application requires vigilance. When you hear "you always" or "you never," pause internally, or if appropriate, externally challenge the absolute. Is that truly accurate? Can you think of a time when I did listen, or when I was on time? This isn't about winning an argument. It is about bringing the conversation back to specific, addressable behaviors. If your partner is genuinely open, they might realize the harshness of their language. If they double down, it indicates an unwillingness to engage fairly, a significant warning sign that the relationship is built on a shaky foundation of generalized accusations rather than specific solvable issues. Now let's talk about Feynman, reading and assumptions, Fey. This pattern manifests when someone presumes to know what you are thinking. "I know you just said that to annoy me," or "You don't really care, you just pretend to." The problem here is a fundamental breach of trust and respect. You are denied your own internal experience, and your thoughts and feelings are dictated to you, often with a negative spin. This leaves you in a constant state of having to defend your motives, your intentions, and your very self. It is an exhausting and demoralizing experience. The concept of mind reading is a common cognitive distortion, where individuals believe they know what others are thinking or feeling, often projecting their own anxieties or insecurities onto them. In a relationship, this becomes toxic because it bypasses genuine communication. Instead of asking, "What are you thinking?" or "How do you feel about this?" the mind reader asserts their presumed knowledge as fact. It can also be a defensive mechanism, preemptively attacking to avoid potential criticism or vulnerability. When someone consistently mind reads, they create a barrier to true intimacy. They are, in effect, saying, "I don't need to hear from you. I already know what you are about." This erodes the possibility of authentic connection and mutual understanding. For application, when confronted with mind reading, it is vital to gently but firmly correct the assumption and re-establish your own agency. "I appreciate you might think that, but what I am actually feeling is X," or instead of assuming, "Could you please ask me what my intentions are?" This encourages open communication and forces the other person to engage with your actual words and feelings, rather than their persistent mind reading without correction or willingness to hear your truth is a huge red flag, because it means your partner isn't truly interested in understanding Fei, but rather validating their own narrative about you. If you are finding these insights resonant, if a light bulb is going off, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more valuable discussions like this to light, helping others navigate. This is a classic destructive pattern where one person consistently avoids taking responsibility for their own actions, instead placing the fault squarely on someone else, usually you. "I only yelled because you made me angry. If you hadn't done X, I wouldn't have had to do Y. Or it is your fault we're fighting." The problem is clear. There is no space for growth, apology, or mutual problem solving when one person refuses to acknowledge their role in any conflict or negative outcome. You end up carrying the emotional burden for both of you, constantly feeling like the problem, even when you are not. This creates an environment of profound unfairness and resentment. The concept of blame shifting is deeply rooted in ego. It's easier to project fault outwards than to look inwards and confront one's own imperfections or mistakes. The analysis reveals that blame shifters often have difficulty with vulnerability and accountability. Admitting fault requires humility, and for some, that feels like weakness. They might have learned this pattern in childhood, or it could be a coping mechanism for underlying insecurities. In a relationship, continuous blame shifting starves the connection of genuine repair. Apologies become conditional, solutions are one-sided, and empathy withers, because one person is always the victim or the aggressor, never a participant in mutual growth. The application involves recognizing this pattern and refusing to accept undue blame. "I understand you are upset, but my action, you chose to yell, and I'd like to discuss that choice. It is about drawing a clear boundary around what you are responsible for and what you are not. Do not internalize their blame. If your partner consistently shifts blame and refuses to take responsibility for their part, it indicates a profound inability to engage in healthy conflict resolution, leaving you perpetually in a defensive and unfairly accused position. This is a relationship that will struggle to heal and grow. Perhaps one of the most corrosive communication patterns identified by Dr. John Gottman as one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse for relationships is fake contempt. Fake contempt goes beyond simple criticism or anger. It is an expression of disgust and disrespect for your partner. It manifests as sarcasm, cynicism, eye-rolling, "You are such an idiot for thinking that," "Oh, look who decided to grace us with their intelligence," accompanied by a dismissive gesture. The problem with contempt is that it completely obliterates the foundation of admiration and respect that all healthy relationships require. When someone expresses contempt, they are communicating that they view you as inferior, worthless, or beneath them. The concept of contempt in Gottman's research is the single greatest predictor of divorce. It signals that the speaker has lost all positive regard for their partner and views them with disdain. The analysis shows that contempt often arises from long-standing negative thoughts about the partner, festering resentment, or an unchecked sense of superiority. It is a powerful and dangerous emotion because it not only damages the recipient. For application, encountering contempt is a severe warning sign that demands immediate attention. If you are on the receiving end, it is vital to recognize that this is not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of the speaker's internal state and their inability to manage conflict respectfully. You must communicate the unacceptability of this behavior, perhaps by saying, "When you roll your eyes at me, I feel completely disrespected, and I cannot continue this conversation until we can speak to each other with basic human respect." If contempt is a persistent pattern, it indicates a relationship in dire straits. Respect is non-negotiable, and if it is consistently absent, the relationship is fundamentally broken. Now we turn to a particularly insidious and manipulative pattern, gaslighting. This is a form of psychological manipulation where a person makes you question your own memory, perception, or sanity. That never happened. "You are crazy, I never said that," "You are imagining things," or "You are too sensitive." The problem with gaslighting is that it systematically erodes your sense of reality and self-trust. You begin to doubt your own experiences, your own judgment, and your own sanity. This leaves you vulnerable, confused, and increasingly dependent on the gaslighter's version of reality. It is a deeply disorienting and traumatizing experience. The concept of gaslighting originated from a 1938 play and a 1944 film, Gaslight, where a husband slowly manipulates his wife into believing she is insane. The analysis reveals that gaslighting is often employed by individuals with narcissistic tendencies or personality disorders, or those who are deeply insecure and seek to control their environment. It's a defense mechanism that twists reality to protect their own fragile self-image or to avoid accountability. The long-term effects are devastating, leading to anxiety, depression, and a profound loss of self. For application, if something feels off, if you constantly feel confused or like you are losing your mind, document events, keep journals, and confide in trusted friends or family to ground yourself in reality. When confronted with gaslighting, state your truth calmly but firmly. "My memory is clear on this, and I remember it differently, or I know what I experienced, and I am not crazy." Do not engage in arguments about reality. It is not a pattern that can be fixed by communication alone. It often requires professional intervention or a reassessment of whether the relationship is sustainable or safe. Another subtle yet damaging pattern is triangulation. This occurs when a third party is brought into a conflict or discussion, often to avoid direct communication or to gain an ally against you. "My mom agrees with me that you are too..." The problem here is that it diverts attention from the direct issue between two people and introduces external judgment, making it harder to resolve the core conflict. It also creates an unfair dynamic, making you feel ganged up on or judged by people who aren't directly involved. The concept of triangulation is a well-known family systems theory concept. It is a dysfunctional way of managing anxiety and tension. Instead of dealing with discomfort directly, the tension is diffused by bringing someone else into the dynamic. The analysis shows that triangulation often arises from an inability to handle direct conflict or a desire to avoid vulnerability. It can also be a passive-aggressive tactic to criticize without directly owning the criticism. It erodes trust and intimacy because it avoids authentic one. It's a way of saying, I don't trust our ability to resolve this, or I need external validation to feel right. For application, when you recognize triangulation, gently but firmly redirect the conversation back to the two of you. I appreciate your friend's opinion, but this is a conversation between us. Let's keep it focused on how Fentuai can solve this. Or, bringing others into our disagreements makes it harder for us. This reinforces the boundary that your relationship's issues are for Fayu Tu Fei to resolve, not for external parties to judge or interfere with. If triangulation is a persistent pattern, it indicates an unwillingness to engage in direct, mature problem solving, creating an unbridgeable distance between you and your partner. Consider also the profound impact of a Fei lack of empathy or emotional detachment Fei. This pattern is less about what is Fei said Fei, and more about what is Fei absent Fei. It is the blank stare when you are distressed, the quick change of subject when you are trying to share a deep feeling, or the inability to grasp or respond to your emotional state. Why are you crying? What is the big deal? With a tone of genuine bewilderment rather than concern. The problem is that empathy is the glue of human. When it is consistently absent, you feel profoundly alone even in the presence of your partner. Your emotional needs are unmet, leading to a deep sense of neglect and isolation. The concept here is fundamental to human relationships. Empathy is the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from within their frame of reference. A lack of it can stem from various sources. Fei emotional unavailability. The analysis shows that without empathy, a relationship is devoid of true intimacy and reciprocity. It becomes a transactional arrangement rather than a deep, soulful connection. You are left pouring your emotions into a void, with no sense of being truly seen or understood. It is not necessarily malicious, but it is deeply wounding. For application, acknowledging this pattern is vital. If your partner consistently struggles to empathize, it is important to differentiate between a temporary lapse and a consistent inability. You might need to explicitly teach them what empathy looks like for you. When I am upset, what I really need is for you to just listen and acknowledge my feelings, not try to fix them. However, if after repeated attempts, the emotional detachment remains a core feature, you must confront. This is a difficult truth, but an essential one for your emotional health. A relationship without empathy is like a body without a heart. It cannot truly live and thrive. Now, let's explore Fei passive aggression Fei. This is indirect hostility, a subtle way of expressing anger or resentment without openly confronting the issue. It might manifest as procrastination, sarcasm, "Oh, I am fine," said with a sigh and a dismissive wave when clearly they are not. The problem is that passive aggression poisons the air with unspoken tension and unresolved conflict. It is impossible to address an issue directly when it is expressed in such an indirect manner, leading to immense frustration and a feeling of walking on eggshells. The concept of passive aggression is a defense mechanism where individuals express negative feelings indirectly, rather than asserting them openly. It allows them to avoid direct confrontation, which they might fear while still expressing their anger or dissatisfaction. The analysis reveals that passive aggression often stems from a fear of direct conflict, a lack of communication skills, or a desire to punish the other person. It creates a cycle of frustration because the underlying issue is never brought into the light and resolved. You are left constantly trying to decipher hidden meanings and unspoken grievances, which is exhausting and damaging to trust. The relationship becomes a minefield of unexpressed hostilities. For application, when you encounter passive aggression, the key is to bring the unspoken into the open. But gently, "I notice you seem upset. Can you tell me what is really bothering you?" Or, if they forget something crucial, "I understand mistakes happen, but this forgetfulness seems to happen a lot when you are upset. Can we talk about what is really going on?" This encourages direct communication and refuses to engage in the indirect dance. If your partner consistently reverts to passive aggressive behaviors despite your attempts at open communication, it signals a significant block in their ability to engage authentically and respectfully, making true intimacy elusive and conflict resolution impossible. Another major warning sign, also identified by Gottman, is fey defensiveness, fey. This is when, in response to a perceived attack or criticism, one person immediately protects themselves, often by counterattacking, whining, playing the victim, or making excuses. "It is not my fault you always do X," or "Why are you always picking on me?" The problem is that defensiveness prevents effective problem solving and mutual understanding. Instead of listening to a concern and considering one's role, it turns every discussion into a battle for self-preservation rather than a collaborative effort. The concept of defensiveness is a natural human reaction to perceived threat, but in a relationship it becomes destructive when it is the default response. It is a barrier to vulnerability and accountability. The analysis shows that defensiveness often stems from insecurity, a fragile ego, or a history of being attacked or criticized. It is a way of protecting oneself from perceived blame or shame. However, in a relationship context, it creates a toxic cycle where one person feels unheard and frustrated, and the other feels constantly misunderstood and attacked. It starves the relationship of empathy and mutual responsibility. For application, if you are the one being defensive, try to pause and truly listen to the underlying concern. If you are on the receiving end, it is important to express your concerns in a non-blaming way using I statements. "I feel worried when X happens," rather than "you always do X." If defensiveness is a chronic pattern despite your best efforts to communicate gently, it indicates a deep-seated resistance to personal growth and accountability, making it extremely difficult for the relationship to mature. A relationship where defensiveness reigns supreme cannot foster true safety or intimacy, because genuine self-reflection and ownership are absent. Let's delve into another critical but often overlooked pattern, fey conditional love or approval fey. This is when affection, attention, or validation is given or withheld based on your adherence to certain expectations or behaviors. "I'll be happy with you if you just change X," or "you are." The problem is that it creates an environment where you feel you must constantly earn love, rather than being loved for who you are. This undermines your sense of self-worth and leads to anxiety, as you're always striving to meet an ever-shifting set of demands. The concept here is that genuine love should be largely unconditional, accepting a person with their flaws and strengths. Conditional love turns affection into a reward. The analysis shows that this pattern often stems from a deep-seated need for control, insecurity, or a distorted view of what love means. It can also be a reflection of how the person themselves was loved conditionally in their formative years. It breeds resentment and a lack of psychological safety, as you never feel truly secure in the relationship. You are constantly on probation for application. It asks for growth and compromise, yes, but not a total overhaul of your identity for approval. You must establish boundaries around what you are willing to change and what you accept about yourself. "I am open to working on X, but my worth as a person and your love for me shouldn't be dependent on it." If your partner consistently uses conditional approval as a means of control, it is a grave warning sign that the relationship is not based on genuine acceptance and respect, but on manipulation and a desire to mold you into their ideal, which is ultimately unsustainable and damaging to your spirit. Then there is the pattern of fey dismissing, or minimizing your needs, fey. This is when your desires, aspirations, or practical needs are consistently pushed aside, ignored, or treated as less important than your partner's. "I don't have time for your hobbies right now. That is not really important," or "you are being selfish for wanting that." The problem is that a healthy relationship is a partnership where both individuals' needs are considered and valued. When one person's needs are systematically minimized, you feel invisible, unvalued, and slowly, your own sense of self begins to shrink. The concept here is that of reciprocity and mutual respect. In a healthy dynamic, partners make space for each other's individuality and support each other's growth. When one person's needs are consistently subordinated, it indicates a self-centered approach to the relationship. The analysis shows this can arise from ego. It often leads to one partner feeling like a supporting character in the other's life, rather than an equal protagonist. The long-term effect is a loss of self and a deep sense of unfulfillment. For application, it is crucial to advocate for your own needs and communicate them clearly. My hobby is important to me, and I need dedicated time for it, or my need for X is valid, and I'd like us to find a way to make space for it. If your partner consistently dismisses your needs after you've clearly articulated them, it is a profound red flag. It indicates a fundamental lack of regard for your well-being and autonomy, suggesting that the relationship is not a partnership but a one-sided arrangement where your role is to cater to their agenda, leading to emotional depletion and ultimately the decay of the relationship. Another significant warning sign is fatigue silent treatment. This is when one person shuts down completely during conflict, refusing to engage, withdrawing physically or emotionally, or giving you the silent treatment. They might walk away, refuse to make eye contact, or give monosyllabic answers. The problem, again, as identified by Gottman, is that stonewalling blocks any possibility of conflict resolution. It leaves the other person feeling abandoned, ignored, and deeply frustrated, amplifying anxiety and preventing any genuine repair. The concept of stonewalling is a powerful form of emotional withdrawal. It is not just taking a break to calm down, it is a refusal to engage, often used as a means of control or punishment. The analysis reveals that stonewalling often stems from an overwhelmed state, a fear of conflict, or an inability to regulate one's emotions during heated discussions. While it might seem like a way to avoid further conflict, it actually escalates the emotional distress for the other partner. It communicates, "I am shutting you out," or "your concerns are not worth my engagement." The emotional toll on the receiving end is immense, leading to feelings of powerlessness and insignificance. For application, if you are stonewalled, it is important to first name the behavior without blame. "I notice you've gone quiet, and I am feeling unheard. Can we pause and revisit this when you feel ready to talk?" Set a time limit if possible. If you are the stonewaller, recognizing this pattern is the first step toward healthier conflict management. Learn to ask for a break constructively. "I am feeling overwhelmed right now. I need 20 minutes to calm down, and then I'd like to revisit this." Persistent stonewalling, despite attempts to create a safe space for dialogue, is a major indicator that the relationship lacks the fundamental tools for healthy conflict resolution. It signals a breakdown in communication so severe that the relationship is essentially on mute, unable to address its own pressing issues. Now, let's explore fake constant criticism, Bayesian constructive feedback asterisk. Asterisk, while constructive criticism is healthy and necessary for growth, this pattern involves a relentless stream of negative commentary about your personality, appearance, choices. "You are always so messy. Why do you always wear that? You never think things through." The problem is that a constant barrage of criticism erodes self-esteem and creates a pervasive sense of inadequacy. You feel like you can never do anything right, leading to anxiety, defensiveness, and a fear of being yourself. The concept here goes beyond addressing specific behaviors. It is an attack on who you are. The analysis reveals that constant criticism often stems from the criticizer's own insecurities, a need for control, or a desire to feel superior. It can also be a misguided attempt to fix you, believing that by pointing out every flaw, they can make you into their ideal partner. However, it only leads to a deeply insecure and unhappy dynamic. It tells you, you are not enough, or you need to be. For application, it is crucial to differentiate between feedback and criticism. Feedback is specific, actionable, and delivered with care. Criticism is often generalized, shaming, and delivered with an intent to belittle. You must set boundaries. "I am open to feedback about specific actions, but I won't tolerate constant criticism of my character or appearance." If the criticism persists, a relationship saturated with constant criticism is an emotionally unsafe space, where your spirit will slowly but surely wither. This leads us to the broader pattern of lack of reciprocity or unequal effort (FE). This isn't a specific communication style, but a systemic imbalance that often manifests through communication. It's when one partner consistently puts in more effort, time, emotional. You initiate all the conversations, plan all the dates, do all the emotional heavy lifting, or always compromise. The problem is that a relationship is a two-way street. When effort is consistently unequal, it leads to burnout for the contributing partner and deep resentment. You feel used, taken for granted, and utterly exhausted. The concept of reciprocity is foundational to any healthy exchange. The analysis reveals that unequal effort can stem from entitlement, immaturity, or simply a lack of awareness from the less contributing partner. However, if this pattern is chronic, it points to a deeper issue of selfishness or a fundamental lack of commitment to the partnership. It communicates, "My comfort is more important than yours," or "I expect to be served, not to serve." For application, you must articulate your feelings and needs for more balanced effort. "I feel like I am doing most of the work in our relationship, and I am starting to feel exhausted and resentful. I need you to step up and contribute more in X, Y, and Z areas." If after clear communication, the imbalance persists, it's a strong warning that the relationship is not a true partnership. It is not sustainable for one person to continuously carry This imbalance will inevitably lead to the emotional collapse of the more invested partner, and ultimately, the relationship itself. Another subtle but potent warning sign is the use of sarcasm or mockery as a primary mode of interaction. While a little lighthearted banter can be fun, when sarcasm becomes the default language, especially during sensitive discussions, it's highly problematic, said with a sneer after you suggest something, or, "I am sure, Faye, your feelings are very important," delivered with a dismissive tone. The problem is that sarcasm and mockery, when consistently used, are veiled forms of contempt and aggression. They prevent genuine emotional expression and create an atmosphere of hostility and distrust. You never know if your partner is being serious or making fun of you, leading to confusion. The concept here is that of a communication style that actively undermines emotional safety. It uses humor as a weapon, making you feel foolish or belittled for expressing your genuine thoughts and feelings. The analysis reveals that this pattern often stems from a fear of direct emotional engagement, an inability to express vulnerability, or a passive-aggressive tendency. It is a way of maintaining emotional distance. It communicates, "I don't take your feelings seriously," or "I enjoy making you feel small." For application, it's important to call out the behavior. When you use sarcasm like that, "I don't feel like you are taking my feelings seriously, and it hurts." Or, "Can we please have a serious conversation without the sarcasm?" If your partner resists this request and continues to use sarcasm as a primary mode of interaction, it's a clear indication that they are unwilling to create an emotionally safe and respectful space for you, which is fundamental to a healthy, thriving relationship. This constant emotional erosion will wear down your trust and affection, eventually leaving the relationship barren. Lastly, let's consider threats or ultimatums. This pattern involves using intimidation or control tactics to get your way, rather than seeking mutual understanding or compromise. "If you don't do X, I am leaving," or "If you ever do that again, it is over." The problem is that threats and ultimatums destroy the sense of safety and equality in a relationship. They replace open dialogue with fear and coercion, making one partner feel manipulated and powerless. This is not how healthy relationships operate. It is a dynamic built on fear, not love. The concept here is about power and control. Threats are used to exert dominance and force compliance, rather than fostering genuine cooperation. The analysis reveals that this pattern often stems from deep insecurity, a desire for control, or an inability to manage conflict constructively. It communicates, "My will is paramount, and I will use fear to enforce it." For application, confronting threats requires courage and clarity. You must recognize that these are not attempts at resolution, but attempts at control. I cannot have a productive conversation when I am being threatened. If you need to leave, that is your choice, but I won't be coerced into making decisions out of fear. If threats or ultimatums are a consistent part of the communication, it is a severe and immediate red flag. A relationship built on intimidation is not a healthy partnership. It is a form of emotional abuse. Your safety and autonomy are paramount, and you must consider whether such a relationship can ever truly be safe or fulfilling. Understanding these communication patterns is not about seeking perfection, But no relationship is without its struggles, and everyone occasionally falls into unhealthy patterns. The key differentiator is Fey intentionality, accountability, and a willingness to repair Fey. Does your partner, when these patterns are pointed out with care and concern, show a willingness to listen, reflect, apologize, and make an effort to change? Or do they dismiss your concerns, double down on their behavior? If you find yourself consistently encountering these red flags, and your attempts to communicate and seek change are met with resistance or further damage, then your relationship is indeed in danger. It might be time to seek professional help. A couples therapist can provide a neutral space and tools for healthier interaction. Or it might be time for a deeper, more difficult conversation with yourself about the sustainability and health of. You deserve to be in a relationship where you feel seen, heard, respected, and safe. These patterns are not just quirks. They are silent destroyers of intimacy and trust. Recognizing them is the first step towards reclaiming your peace and building the kind of profound, resilient connections you truly deserve. I hope today's sharing provides you with a new perspective on the world and on the subtle yet powerful dynamics within